Welcome to our first major AWS domain, Compute Services. Whenever we talk about cloud computing, one question naturally comes up. Where does my application actually runs? Whether you are building Instagram, Netflix, Amazon, a banking application or a simple company website, at some point your code needs CPU, memory, storage and networking resources to execute. This is exactly where AWS Compute Services comes in. Think of compute services as the engine of the cloud. AWS offers multiple ways to run application depending on how much control you want and how much infrastructure management you want AWS to handle. In this section, we will cover four important services: EC2, Lambda, Autoscaling, and Elastic Beanstalk. Also, one thing you will notice throughout the exam is that AWS is constantly asking a simple question: do you want control or do you want convenience? Keep that thought in mind as we go through these services. Amazon EC2, Elastic Compute Cloud. Let's start with the most important compute services in AWS. EC2 stands for Elastic Compute Cloud as marked previously. According to AWS, Amazon EC2 provides secure and resizable compute capacity in the cloud. Now, let's simplify that. EC2 is simply a virtual machine running inside AWS. Instead of buying a physical server, AWS gives you a virtual server that you can launch within minutes. You choose how much CPU you need, how much memory you need, which operating system you want, and what software should run on that machine. This gives you complete control. Now, let's talk about instances type. General purpose instances provide balanced compute and memory. T3, M5, M6i. Another one is compute optimized. Instances which provide more CPU power and are used for heavy computation. Start with C5. Another one is memory optimized instances which provide large amount of RAM and are commonly used for databases and analytical workload. For the cloud practitioner exam, you don't need to memorize instances name, just remember the purpose. Now, let's discuss about the pricing models. On demand. Pay only when you use them. No long-term commitment. Most flexible. Next one is a spot instances. Use AWS unused capacity. Cheapest option but can be interrupted at any time with only 2-minute notice. Next one is reserve instances. Commit for 1 or 3 years and you will receive significant discounts. Then comes the dedicated host, a physical server dedicated entirely to your organization. Now, let's discuss the shared responsibility model. One of the most exam concepts, as previously told. AWS handle physical servers, networking, data center, hypervisor. What you handle? Operating system updates, application security, firewall rules, user permission, data encryption, and patching of operating system. A very common exam question could be, if your EC2 operating system is not patched, who is responsible? So, as I told just now, the patching of operating system is the responsibility of customer. Basically, EC2 equals virtual machine plus compute control. And in the Q section, which pricing model is the most cost effective but can be interrupted? We recently learned about spot instances that could be interrupted with just 2 minutes of notice period. Then, which instance type is best for memory intensive? It is written in the question only: memory intensive, memory optimized instances type. Then you want to run application without long-term commitment. So, on demand. Then, if your EC2 instance OS is not patched, who is responsible? I have discussed just a minute ago. It is the responsibility of the customer. Moving on to another compute service, that is AWS Lambda. Your keyword for the exam for Lambda is serverless. Now, let's move from maximum control to maximum simplicity. Yes, AWS Lambda. It is defined as a service that lets you run code without provisioning or managing servers. Notice something important? Lambda is serverless. What do I mean by serverless? It doesn't mean server does not exist. It simply means someone else, that is your CSP cloud service provider, AWS manages them for you. You just upload your code. AWS handles infrastructure, scaling, availability, patching, everything. In another word, Lambda is event driven. So another keyword to look out for exam is event driven serverless. This means Lambda function execute only when something happen. For example, a file gets uploaded to S3. We will learn about S3 later, but just assume as a Google Drive. A file gets uploaded to S3. An API request arrives, a database record changes, an event occurred. And whenever an event occurred, Lambda wakes up to execute the code and stops. This makes Lambda extremely cost effective. You only pay when you run the code. No execution, no cost. Now, let's compare EC2 with Lambda. EC2, you manages the server. In Lambda, AWS manages the server. EC2 is for long running application. Lambda is short-lived, event-driven workload. EC2, you get more control. With Lambda, less management. For the exam, whenever you see the word serverless, event-driven, then your answer is Lambda immediately. So, quiz time. What does serverless means in AWS Lambda? Obviously, AWS manages the server for you. Which services can trigger the AWS Lambda function when a file is uploaded? File could be uploaded to S3 also. Lambda is best suited for which of the following? Obviously, short-lived and event-driven. Short-lived and event-driven. How is AWS Lambda pricing calculated? Per request and duration. So it is highly cost effective. Now moving to AWS Autoscaling. Let's imagine you are running an online shopping website. Most days you have 100 users, but then Black Friday arrives. Suddenly you have 1 lakh users. Without scaling, your website crashes. There is where autoscaling becomes very important. AWS defines autoscaling as a service that automatically adjusts capacity to maintain performance and availability. In simpler words, autoscaling automatically adds server when demand increases and removes server when demand decreases. The 3 keywords AWS loves are elasticity, availability, cost optimization are the key benefit of autoscaling. Elasticity means expanding and shrinking automatically. Availability means keeping the application up and online. Cost optimization means paying only for resources you actually need. Now, let's discuss cooldown period. After autoscaling launches or removes an instance, it waits before performing another scaling action. The cooldown period is 300 seconds or 5 minutes. So, for the exam, if you see traffic spike, automatic capacity adjustment, think autoscaling. Let's move to quiz. What is the primary purpose of Amazon EC2 autoscaling? Simply to scale up or to scale down the EC2 capacity. Which benefit of autoscaling ensure that your application remain available during traffic spikes? Elasticity. What is the default cooldown period for EC2 autoscaling? 300 seconds or 5 minutes when you stop the instance or when you start an instance. When demand decreases, what does autoscaling do? When the demand decreases, it terminates the unnecessary instance where there is less to no load. Now moving to another compute service, that is Elastic Beanstalk. Elastic Beanstalk is one of the easiest AWS services to understand. AWS defines Elastic Beanstalk as an easy to use service for deploying and scaling web applications and services. Imagine you are a developer. You have already written your application. Instead of manually creating EC2 instances, configuring load balancers, setting up autoscaling, and configure monitoring, you simply upload your code. Elastic Beanstalk automatically creates EC2 instances, load balancers, autoscaling groups, CloudWatch monitoring once defined. And all of these happens automatically. You just say, I need this, and it gets up. This is why Elastic Beanstalk is considered as a platform as a service. Platform as a service. So, a very common misconception is that Elastic Beanstalk eliminates EC2. No, this is completely false. Beanstalk still uses EC2 underneath. AWS is simply managing it for you. It is spinning off your EC2 by itself. And the easiest exam trick would be for this one is EC2 equals you manages servers, but Elastic Beanstalk equals AWS manages the server. So let's quickly see real exam question. A developer wants to upload code without provisioning servers manually. When they don't want to provision servers manually, what they use is Elastic Beanstalk. Another one is, which AWS service automatically provision EC2 instances, load balancer, and auto scaling resources? Automatic provision is Beanstalk. Elastic Beanstalk is best categorized as platform as a service. You are just responsible for creating your application. True or false? Elastic Beanstalk eliminates the need for EC2. No, it still uses EC2 behind the scenes. Let's quickly summarize everything we have learned so far in the compute section. EC2 is virtual machines, maximum control, full control. Lambda, serverless, event driven. Autoscaling, elasticity, availability, cost optimization. Elastic Beanstalk, platform as a service, easy deployment, AWS manages your infrastructure. Now, let us test ourselves. So, which AWS services allow you to run code without provisioning or managing servers? Whenever we are talking about servers that is to be managed by AWS, answer is AWS Lambda. But when we will talk servers to be managed by customer, it is EC2. So explanation is Lambda is a serverless compute service where AWS manages the servers for you. Next, a company expects a sudden increase in traffic during Black Friday sale. Which service should be used to handle this? Sudden spike, so more instances needed automatically. So auto scaling. Or when the spike fails, it needs to terminate the instances as well. Which EC2 pricing models provide the lowest cost but carries the risk of interruption? Spot instances, it could be terminated with a notice of 2 minutes. A developer wants to deploy a web application without managing infrastructure. Without managing servers, that is Lambda. Without managing infrastructure, that is Beanstalk. Elastic Beanstalk is a PaaS service, platform as a service that handles infrastructure like EC2, load balancer, and scaling. So, another one. What is the default cooldown period for EC2 autoscaling? 300 seconds, 5 minutes. Best services uses EC2 instances underneath and also creates a load balancer and autoscaling group for you. So, Elastic Beanstalk. Quick comparison to the end. EC2 full control over servers and OS. Lambda run codes without managing servers. Autoscaling automatically adjust capacity. Elastic Beanstalk deploy apps easily. AWS manages the infra. For example, you need to understand the purpose of each service, not just the name. Focus on when to use each services and the key benefit. You can expect around 5 to 6 questions from this topic.